Greetings and welcome. My name is Jake Rayson. I am a forest gardener and a forest garden designer. And today I wanted to talk to you about wildflowers in the forest garden and the role of wildflowers. So this talk is on at forestgarden.wales/talks/wildflowers. So that will be there with all the links in it. And this is what I call a pennywort, or it's also known as a wool pennywort in England. Umbilicus rupestris. There we go. Absolutely stunning native wildflower. grows in wools, funnily enough. And here's a big picture of it. So, yes, I do think wildflowers are just really kind of quite beautiful, and there's a vast amount of potential in the garden, and so much that you can do with wildflowers. I just think that gardening as a whole has been led down a path of exotics and collecting from overseas and enforced aesthetics. And yeah, which is kind of interesting in its own right, but it kind of misses out the role of nature. And this is the big part of what we're going to talk about today, is the role of nature in a forest garden. You have a growing edible crops with nature. This is a central part of it, and wildflowers are an integral part of that picture, an integral part of that garden. And this has been missing from traditional horticulture, particularly ornamental horticulture and vegetable horticulture, to be honest. And it's time to redress the balance for the sake of wildlife. And yes, and wool pennywort is actually edible. These are edible leaves as well. They're kind of like quite fleshy and a bit of a cucumbery taste to them. I haven't eaten them in any great quantities, but they are edible and quite stunning. And just to give you an idea, I just think this is the most incredible photograph. This was out in Herefordshire, in a village called Webley, where my parents live. I took the dog out for a walk last summer, this was, and it is stunning. This is a kind of slightly abandoned field, and it is an absolutely stunning example, for my mind, of the beauty of wildflowers. So you've got great stitchwort and knapweed, and there's some yarrow, or it might be oxeye daisy, and there's some docks in there. There's all sorts going on. It is just the most incredible display. So I think first and foremost, they can be so visually pleasing and just absolutely stunning. So what I want to talk about today is why wildflowers. What's the reasoning behind wildflowers, and how do they fit into a forest garden? Secondly, my slideshow stopped working. Sorry. Secondly, is native where possible. If you just want a couple of words to sum up for whenever I'm talking about wildflowers in the forest garden, I'm perfectly aware that you can't always have native plants in a forest garden. There are a whole variety of different crops that you have which aren't native, which is absolutely fine, but native plants where possible, and the reason is for wildlife. Yeah, so native where possible. If you just go along with that, then that makes a lot of sense. That kind of fits in. You can have your edible cake and have wild native plants in that garden as well. And then the final part of today's talk is I'm going to introduce Garden Wild, which is it's a CIC, a community interest company that I've just set up, making an application to get an online wildflower gallery set up, and the whole purpose of Garden Wild is an organisation which is promoting the use of wildflowers in gardens in the UK. So I'll talk about that in a bit as well. So that's it. So why wildflowers? Well, for me, what it comes down to is that a forest garden, the simplest. I'll grab a book actually, be the easiest way of describing it. So Martin Crawford's book it's a great book, great reference, and an overall guide to creating a forest garden. And his strapline subheading on the book is "Working with Nature to Grow Edible Crops," and it's the working with nature part. So that is the important bit. You work with nature. And part of working with nature is working with the habitat, the environment that you have, the climate that you have, and the existing flora and fauna. And the wildflowers and native plants are an absolutely integral part of that. That's what it is. So that is why wildflowers. And the reason is because there's some argument, oh, well, non-natives provide pollen, and non-natives provide habitat, and non-natives provide a food source for plants. And that is true to an extent, but generally that, and it's better to have plants than no plants, but generally native plants are much better at providing food and habitat and shelter for native fauna for native wildlife, and that the simplest kind of idea is that you have what you're trying to do is support insects and as the kind of foundation of the food web. Well, part of the foundation of the food web. So insects provide food for for animals, for the wild, for birds and for other animals as well. But if you've got to provide a food source for insects, insects are really kind of at the heart of it. And I would actually say this extends across. It's a food web. It's not like a hierarchy. You also have, of course, you have the soil, you have the fungi as well, and other plants and communities. But it's all about providing a living ecosystem, a kind of sustainable, edible ecosystem. And that's at the heart of what a forest garden is that you're creating an ecosystem so that it's low maintenance and it's easy to look after, and it's that ecosystem, it is kind of reliant upon native plants as well. So that's why wildflowers. So with my my slideshow's playing up. So going back to the kind of forest garden definition, work with nature to grow edible crops, and the idea in a cool, temperate forest garden is that you are emulating a woodland edge. It's not like thick woodland; it's just the edge of woodland, and you're using perennial and ground cover plants, and it's kind of edible is the kind of heart at the heart of it. And just want to look at very quick look at the characteristics of a forest garden as well. And you can see where this is an illustration taken from Martin Crawford's book with his permission, and you can see that the forest garden is situated right next to the woodland. The further right you go, the more inputs is required, the more maintenance is required. And the further left you go, the wilder it is, and you're just kind of balancing a forest garden. It's balancing on the cusp of a woodland, so it requires less maintenance. So that it's sustainable, that you've got less inputs going in, yet you're still getting crops out, and it's productive. This is kind of a key characteristic of a forest garden, is that you are getting a crop from it. There is a fantastic book about Native Americans, I really can't remember the name of it, who managed the landscape in different parts of North America. But there's one particular one I think it is near Yosemite, and they were managing oak trees, and you wouldn't, the settlers, when they first arrived, they didn't even realize that it was a managed space. They thought it was wilderness, but the oak trees had been maintained and looked after and grown and harvested as well. And it's like a giant, great big forest garden, and people didn't even know. So that it is a productive space. And key, going back again, the kind of key part of this, it's wildlife friendly, and it's wildlife friendly because that is what you're doing by creating this forest garden on the edge of the woodland. You're creating something that relies upon natural fertility, natural predators to keep the whole system in balance. So what you are doing is creating an edible ecosystem. There's two words: edible ecosystem. That's what we're after with a forest garden, getting that balance right. And yeah. And yes, there are layers in the forest garden as well, so you're using all the available space, and that mostly perennial plants. The majority of them are perennial plants because they're lower maintenance too. But it's that idea of an edible ecosystem that you can, if that's the one thing you want to take away, it's edible ecosystem, which means growing native plants where possible. And you're saying, yeah, but why wildflowers? And it really is, we are headed, I'm very, very sorry to say this, but we aren't doing enough to tackle the climate emergency. As you can witness, the extreme weather events in Texas. And we have to do more as a species to, it's not to revert back to how things were, but it's to increase resilience in the ecosystems that we have, so that we give wildlife and other life forms a best chance possible to not be totally wiped out. And we don't know how it's going to play out. We don't know, that there's a vast amount of complexity. A lot of the work that we do as gardeners, we're not aware of the benefits and who it's benefiting and who appreciates your garden. And this will always be the case. When you do good work, you do not know how that work will be received. All you can do is do the best work that you can, and hopefully that you will provide a shelter and food and habitat for life, and that will, at some point, you might be part of saving certain species, for example. You just don't know. But what we can do now is to get the ball rolling to create forest gardens and the kind of ethos of forest gardening within gardening itself and across society, so that when you look at something, when you look at an endeavour, human endeavour, you are saying, is this sustainable? Does this provide for life as the measure? So it's life as the measure that we have to look at. We're a long way away from it, but you have to start somewhere. And I think starting in a garden is a good example. And the other side of the coin, obviously, is a climate emergency, but it is also an ecological emergency too. 1 in 7 species in the UK is at risk of extinction. 1 in 7. That is vast. Oops, that's just not doing what I want it to do. So there is a State of Nature report from 2019. So that's where the figures are from. There's a link to it in the notes. I'll put a link to it in the chat as well. But that is an horrendous figure. It's bad. And it's not just gardens, it's agriculture as well. It's the industrial agriculture that we have in this country. It's the effects of climate change, and it's the removal of habitat. But gardens are a good place to start to address these issues and to raise awareness as well. So the idea is, I really do feel as a forest gardener that, I've got a couple of acres in West Wales, and it's not very big in the grand scheme of things, but I am actually part of a bigger movement of people. It's not about me. It's not about where I live and what I'm doing. It's about the movement as a whole, and getting these ideas out. It's kind of forgetting yourself and then thinking about other species and other people and the kind of the broader picture. So yeah, I am. It's kind of interesting, doing the best that I can and putting the word out. So really, really, please do promote the idea of sustainable practices in the garden, sustainable practices in all walks of life as well. Because I think what's happened is that everything has been very... Oh, God, my slideshow's kind of messing up a bit, sorry. The whole kind of industry, as soon as I hear the word industry, it sets off warning bells for me. And there is a gardening industry. Garden centres have become centres of consumption, and it becomes about profit. It becomes about selling things. It's creating units that you can then measure the cost of, that you make a product, you sell the product, the consumer consumes the product, and so on and so forth, in an ever destructive cycle. And it's not about It's about what consumers want. It's about what gardeners want. It's not about what your garden wants, what your wildlife wants, where you live, what lives there with you. What does it want? So I think if there's a shift in emphasis and a shift in attitudes towards this, that you concentrate on providing for where you live, and you're providing for the wildlife in your area within your garden, and it doesn't become about you anymore. It becomes about others, and it becomes about the whole. So that's a kind of very interesting question. I'd love to do a live stream about Marxism and the garden and Marxism, and centuries of human exploitation. But I'll save that for another time. But I do think it's very, very kind of interesting that it doesn't really sell. And this is the kind of issue that it's very difficult to get these ideas across, because it's so much of our culture and our society now is about how things look, what the appearance is, and the appearance is not the thing. I'm not terribly sure what the thing is, but it sure as hell isn't the way that things look, and so much is based upon that. So anyway, enough of the mildly political ranting. Native where possible. So coming back to the forest gardening, the idea is that the stuff that you're planting in the forest garden is native where possible. There's a great chap called Professor Douglas Tallamy. Oh, where is he? He's here somewhere. I've got him on the link. Is he here? Oh, there he is. So Doug Tallamy, he's brilliant. He's done a vast amount of work about wildlife and gardening, and he's a really, really interesting guy, with a few books out as well. And he says, in the past we've asked one thing of our gardens, that they're pretty, and now they have to support life, sequester carbon, feed pollinators, and manage water. And the whole point behind this is that for far too long, the emphasis has been on how gardens appear to humans. That's the central. How does it look to humans? That's the central kind of thing behind gardening. The aesthetics. What colours are there? Do the colours match nicely together? Do they provide all year round interest? I think it is a load of bollocks. I really, really do. I think you've just got to change the way that you perceive gardens and change the way that you appreciate plants. And once you start to, I'm just going to go back to this picture here. Once you start to look at a landscape, once you start to look at plants and the way that they support other life and the way that they are interwoven with each other, this is far, far, far more important and far more satisfying as well. Not only this scene here I think is visually stunning with a range of different colours, but it's also providing nectar for pollinators and habitat for mammals, and a food source for insects eating the leaves of the different plants. And once you know the name of the plants and the role that they play and your relationship with that, then that involvement, that education and that involvement in this is far more rewarding, because you're getting so much more from it. You have a sense of you are contributing, you are giving back. Yep. And I think this is such an important thing about gardening with native plants, is this is what you're doing. It's not just about you. It's not just about how things look. So the kind of key thing to remember is with gardens is that with gardening with native plants and native wildflowers, is that what is amazing, what is beautiful about it, is that it really depends upon where you are, and it's not even in a country. It's not countrywide. It's very specific to your location, and this flies in the face of centuries of a movement towards homogeneity in society and a homogeneity in gardening. So this is a traditional, quote unquote traditional English cottage garden, and this is the plants that you will have in it, and you'll have lupins and mallow and this and that. And that's what people try to replicate. So you have settlers will move to New Zealand, for example, and introduce a whole load of European plants into New Zealand, totally disturbing the ecology of New Zealand, and introducing invasive plants, because this is the idea that they're trying to perpetuate. This is what we had from the homeland, and this is what we're going to continue to do. Whereas if you're working with native plants, the principles are the same. You work with native plants, but you work with your ecology, but it's very, very specific to where you are in the world. And I think there's a fantastic book, A New Garden Ethic by Benjamin Vogt, which is great, which is really political. Actually, it's good. It's good stuff. It's challenging and it's good. He just says grow native plants. Yep, just grow native plants. There is no excuse to have non-native plants in your garden, which I think is say it how it is, because it is about this idea that humans are better than everybody else. Human exceptionalism. We're at the top of the tree and we can do what we want, which I think is hugely misguided. And there's a human human centered around the human. There'll be a word for it. You've got to be very careful about this, even in a forest garden as well, which the whole idea is it's an edible ecosystem, that you just got to be careful about focusing purely on the crop that you're getting. When I first started out with forest gardening 6 years ago, I was very much like, I'm going to have this fruit bush and that fruit bush, and I don't even want any system plants. I don't want to bother having comfrey because it will take up valuable space where I can have an edible crop. And it was all about what I wanted. And I kind of come round to, it's not just about me, and it's not just about the crop that I'm getting from it. The forest garden really is somewhere where you can have both. There's enough for everybody. There's enough food that I can't eat that is providing as a food source for local wildlife. But the stuff I do have, the raspberries that I have growing, the blackbirds help themselves to quite a few of them. You can share it. Yep. So you've got to be careful. Always be aware of this human-centered kind of view of things. Yeah. So the other one, is Doug Tallamy. He's got a project called the Homegrown National Park. So Benjamin Vogt has a website called Monarch Gardens. There's loads and loads of stuff on there. This is all kind of very North American. He's very much into prairies and getting rid of lawns and putting prairies in its place, which is brilliant. But as you can see from all very specific to North America. And then Doug Tallamy has a website, again, North America, restoring biodiversity, a homegrown national park, a new project he has coming off. But the principles are the same for the UK. Now the big issue is that I have not found anything kind of UK specific. The best I came up with. Hold on a second. Oh, where has it gone? That's kind of rubbish. Yeah. So the best. Oh, that's the wrong bloody book. This one here. The best book I came up with was in the UK was The Wild Garden by Violet Stevenson, which is about 40 years old, 40 years old. And you just go, this is the best that we've got. This is like about gardening with wildlife and wild plants a bit in the UK. That's it. And then I found another one, The Wild Garden by Lucy Huntington. And it's okay. It's not bad. I prefer the Wild Garden book, to be honest. If you can get hold of a copy, very cheap, about £3 or something. But there's nothing like Benjamin Vogt's work or Doug Tallamy's work in the UK that I am aware of for design, gardening with native plants. So I'll come on to that. So UK native specific. So this is like taking those principles and working with them locally, working with them where you are. So they're native plants where you are. This is Echinacea. What is it, Echinacea? I can't remember which one. But it's an Echinacea, and it's a native North American prairie plant. You can grow it in the UK, but don't. Because we don't need to. We've got loads and loads of native wildflowers that you can grow instead, which will provide much better food source for a whole load of plants. So yes, you can have non-natives. It's not like a hard and fast rule, but just do think about what grows where you are. And I think there's just so much choice and there's so much potential for growing native plants in an exciting and ornamental way as well, wherever you are, that there is no need to buy non-native plants. Because I think this is just what we are used to as humans, and what is perceived as a plant that you plant. This is everyone plants echinaceas, obviously, but you don't have to. A really, really good source of knowledge would be your local botanic gardens. I think it depends where you are. We're very lucky here. We've got the National Garden. Oh, what's it called? National Garden of Wales, Botanic Garden of Wales, down near Carmarthen. And there is a Welsh, the Welsh natives section as well. Fantastic. There's a really, really, really good woman whose name I've forgotten. Who's great. Who's really, really good. Really interesting project, and it's about rare species of Welsh plants and kind of reintroducing them and doing some fantastic work. So do find out from your local Carly. That's her name. That's the name of the woman doing the project. But do find out from your local botanic garden. There should be somebody who is interested in native plants, and there should be some sort of schemes going on. So that's a really, really good source of information. And one of Doug Tallamy's guidelines really is saying don't rip everything out and then just plant natives from scratch. Use what you've got, because non-natives do provide habitat. And he said a good rule of thumb is 2/3 for the birds. So 2/3 native plants by biomass for the birds. So in a forest garden, what we're looking at is windbreaks. So this is about now when I design a windbreak, I look at whether it's native or not, and that's my first port of call. So for example, Guelder Rose, what have I got here? Guelder Rose, European Barberry, I've got some wild privet, crikey, a whole range of different plants that you can use natively, sea buckthorn. But native plants, first of all, and I will have non-natives in there sometimes as well, but the bulk of my windbreaks from now on are native. And then fertility plants as well. So again, comfrey as a fertility plant is the main example. There are other kind of system plants as well, which I can't think of at all off the top of my head. But if you go you can go for native plants. So there are about 5 different native comfreys. So there is Symphytum officinale, which is the native one. There's a blue flowered variety of UK native wildflowers, a UK native comfrey, but there's also Symphytum tuberosum, and there's a few other ones as well, kind of different heights. So yeah, not massive. It's just, if you can use native plants and use it for fertility, and then ground cover. This is something I'm really, really excited about actually, and interested about. I have been growing green strawberry, Fragaria viridis, which is a North American. I think it's North American. Crikey, Fragaria. I've been growing green strawberry, which is a North American strawberry, I think, and then Fragaria chiloensis, which I think is Chilean, a beach strawberry, might be North and South America, but not European. But so now I'm looking at growing native kind of varieties. I've been growing more wild strawberry, starting out some wild strawberry ground cover. Won't be as good a cover possibly, but starting to get round to doing that. And the same thing with I use ground ivy quite a lot. Glaucoma heteracea dies back in the winter in the UK, but it does give a really good ground cover for most of the year. And there's another one, yellow pimpernel, Lysomachia nemorum. So there's quite a few that I'm just experimenting with for ground cover. So rather than relying upon Nepalese raspberry and dwarf comfrey, Symphytum ibericum, Iberian comfrey, I'm trying to go for native species to use instead. Really, really, really important. So the bulk, there is always an opportunity to plant natives in a forest garden. So windbreaks, fertility, and ground cover. So on UK natives, I did. Oh yes, I have got it. Cool. Oh, there we go. Carly, so Conserving Welsh Plants. That's the name of the project at the Botanic Garden Wales. Let's get rid of these. So finding a plant. This is all kind of UK native specific. I'm sorry. So if there's anyone who's watching who's not in the UK, there will be equivalents. There are equivalents in different countries. So there's a load of stuff in North America that I know of, and I think also in Australia as well. But I haven't really got time to look into that. First, if you can look up for native plants, there's for ornamentals. There's a really good feature on the RHS Plant Finder, online plant finder. It has a native filter. And if you go to the bottom here, native to the United Kingdom on the plant search, and that gives you 335. So it's not bad. It's not a bad start. There are quite a few more than that, but it's a good place to start because it gives loads and loads of information about different native plants in the UK. So that's native filter. And then I have been creating yet another spreadsheet. I'm slowly building up a spreadsheet for UK native wildflowers. And what I have found, I didn't really think about this. I was looking for different sources of information about UK native flowers, and Plants for Future, pfaf.org, they have covered pretty much all of them. Pretty much all the UK natives that I've come across now, they've covered them. So I'm kind of quite impressed. And they do have a lot of information there as well. So fantastic resource. That's a really, really good place to start looking for information about UK specific plants, UK native plants. And then the other one is from a more botanical point of view. There is the Botanical Society of Britain and Ireland's Plant Atlas, and it's okay. It's got a lot more kind of botanical information in there. So I don't know, potentilla. This is going to be bad. Symphytum. There we go. It has more botanical information about it and kind of less about the horticultural aspect, about the conditions and the colours and the flowering times and the like. I would say Plants for a Future is my first port. I'd use the Plant Atlas for the kind of basic information and the name, and then I would use Plants for a Future for more information about how to cultivate it, what conditions it likes. So this is what's it called? Symphytum tuberosum. Tuberous comfrey. But this kind of gives information. This kind of gives a basic botanical information about it. So that it's good. It's a good reference. And then for this is the best thing, just in terms of accessibility, because the rest of it you need to. It's kind of finding the information. RHS isn't really geared up for native plants, where Plants for a Future is much more about the uses of plants, and the Plant Atlas is more kind of botanical. So if you want an introduction for UK native wildflowers, I just suggest, there are other books as well. This is the one that I just chose. It's called Harrop's Wildflowers and is fantastic. It's a really, really, really good resource. Totally recommend it. It's very short. Each plant only has a small entry in it, but it gives you the distribution maps. And it gives you the kind of details for identifying the plants as well. So, but it's a fantastic overview of the plants, of the different species, which I think I've kind of read this. I've read this cover to cover. It was a bit like reading the Yellow Pages, to be honest. It was a bit of a strange thing to do, but actually really, really interesting to get an overview of all the different plants. So in combination, I think this is where the information is kind of spread out. But in combination, you can get a lot of that information in there. And finally is the what they called the database of insects and their plant foods. And this is absolutely brilliant. So I've kind of talked about this. I mentioned this a few times before. But if you want to find out what insects and what insects a plant will support, this is a really, really good way, a really good resource. So, for example. This is Boraginaceae. I don't know how you pronounce it. This is the Symphytum family. So Symphytum tuberosum, and it will tell you what wildlife that supports. This is just where there's been studies into the wildlife that is supported. This is not saying this is all the wildlife that this plant supports. It gives you an idea of which particular ones have been studied. So there's some fantastic stuff in there. It's really, really good. Really totally recommend that. You can geek out in a big way. And then for the UK as well, I've just started experimenting with buying plug plants for this eco homes job I've been working on. And there's some really, really good nurseries out there. If you can buy from local nurseries. Because of the provenance, you want them to grow in the local condition where you live, basically. So Celtic Wildflowers is down the road in Swansea, which is southeast from here, and Barry Stewart and Sandra run that, and they're brilliant. They're really, really good. They just started up a couple of years ago. Really, really, he's a total plant and wildlife geek. He's brilliant. So totally recommend them. And then the Wildflower Nursery is Lindsay down in Pembrokeshire, and I just bought some plants from them as well, and they're very good. I think quite a small outfit, just starting off again, but they're very good. British Wildflower Plants, I think, are over in Norfolk, and they're much kind of bigger scale. They're much cheaper, but like much bigger scale, and they've been doing it for years. Those are the three suppliers that I've been using to source UK native wildflowers, but I kind of recommend all of them. So good. So I'm just going to quickly look at the questions. Blimey, there's a lot of people. I'm glad people could find it. Oh, absolutely. And I do. Okay, there was a chat going on between Chris and Angie and Lynn, and I do think this is the other side of it as well. Is that the UK? There's so many wildflowers that are actually edible, which is why there's so many of them in the Plants for a Future website. So the crossover is even more, and particularly for medicinal purposes too. So you look at the use of plants across the centuries. That there are so many native plants which are used medicinally and for herbs and as for food as well. So totally, there's a whole load of stuff to explore. Oh yes, nettles. Okay, I'll just have a. Oh, fantastic! So yeah, Robert. Angie just mentioned Robert Wolfe, a Marxist economist in America. So I think is. I think is a very good. If you're into Marxism, an introduction to Marxism, he's a very interesting chap, Robert Wolfe. There we go. Oh, fantastic! And Abby Sue said, Chris Baines, How to Make a Wildlife Garden. Fantastic! Oh, thank you for the recommendation. That's brilliant. So yeah, do send if you have any kind of recommendations about creating wildlife gardens and gardening with native wildflowers. Do let me know. In the UK, do let me know. So there we go. On to the next one. Oh, this is quickly. These are the suppliers. Oh, I'm just going to get rid of these. So I wanted to introduce that's not big enough. Bigger. I want to introduce Garden Wild. This is my project, which is to get. To promote the use of UK native wildflowers in horticulture, in UK horticulture, and this is my project that I'm setting up. So the idea is I'm applying for a grant so that Heather, who is over here, well, that's not her, this is her work, a photographer, she will be taking photographs in Wales, and Sarah Wilson, I'll introduce you to the people. We're going to get together some basically take photographs of UK native wildflowers in an ornamental setting, and take beautiful photographs of them, and then have them up on a website so that people can see the combinations that can be used and the habitats they can be used in, the wildlife that they support, and they're beautiful. They'll be beautiful images in their own right as well. So it really is getting across the aesthetic of wildflowers. And that's the plan. This is the plan. Now, I could have used. There are some very good photographs out there already, and they're Creative Commons, so they're kind of an open license. But I really, really wanted to get really, really high resolution photographs as well, because there is the possibility of using these in a book later on. So the first stop is get some funding to take photographs of of native wildflowers and put them open them up for a wildflower gallery. That's the first stop. And then possibly a book later, and then possibly workshops and courses later on. So Sarah is she's great. She runs the Roots and All podcast, and she's kind of on board for this. She's kind of keen to help out. So that's the website. That's the Roots and All podcast website. But do go and subscribe. Some really, really good podcasts. I mean, I've learned so much from her podcast. It's been fantastic. Barry, who I mentioned earlier, who's the total plant and wildlife geek, and I say that in the nicest possiblest way, who's brilliant, who's so knowledgeable. He actually came round to the house and dropped some plants off, and he started taking off, said, is it okay if I take off some of this lichen off of your oak tree so I can go and identify it later on? And he was just looking at the different lichen on the walls and just listening out for the bird song. It was great. And then there's Heather, who's a local photographer as well. So, then there's me. So these are the people involved in this specific project. So the whole idea is get the wildflower gallery, get the online gallery sorted out first of all. So if you are interested, I am going to I might set up another group, another Telegram group. And I've set up a Twitter account, all the rest of it. But I really, really want to get more into this and then kind of integrate that into my forest gardening as well. Okay, that's me. I talked out 40 minutes and all the rubbish that I've been talking. So, oh yes, this is the Wildflower book. So I kind of mocked up a book. This is what it could look like. It could say by Wildflower Gardening by Sarah Wilson. And in conclusion, what I want to say is, this is what I'm working towards, is bringing together the ornamental, the vegetable gardening and the wildlife gardening, bring them all together under the guise of forest gardening, because forest gardening kind of, forest gardening is at the centre. For me, forest gardening is at the centre of this, and this is what I'm kind of promoting. So it's at the intersection of these different traditionally separate disciplines. I want to kind of bring them all back together. So, fantastic. I've just any last questions there? Lynn's asked, will you add edible and medicinal uses to the wildflower garden, to the wildflower spreadsheet? I am actually creating a wildflower spreadsheet, and I won't for now because I want to keep that separate. Really, the information is up on the Plants for a Future website. So if you want to know about the edible and medicinal uses, you can look up those plants on the Plants for a Future website. The purpose of a spreadsheet is so that if you're designing a garden or you're interested in finding out about using UK native wildflowers, that you have a quick overview of how big, how wide, what soil it likes, how moisture, whether it grows in poor soil, drought, colour, flowering period, that kind of stuff. All the information condensed into a small amount as possible, so you can get an overview of all the different plants, and then kind of slot them in to how your traditional ornamental garden. So I hope that is useful. I am about to jump over to Zoom and kick off Zoom in a second. I'll just paste that again for anyone who's turned up late. And here we go. Oh, come on. That's a Zoom meeting in there, and the password is Teasel. So hopefully see you over there. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall speak to you soon. Bye.